Hello, guys. Welcome to another video of philosophy. This is Chapter 2, Lesson 2 Western Conception of Man. Audio recorded by Mr. Vidal. Western Conceptions of Man. Lesson 2 The philosophical conceptions of the human person from Western philosophy can be braced through the development of philosophy in the West. In Western philosophy, the development of the conceptions about the human person is related to the search for the truth and knowledge about reality. Just like the Eastern conceptions, man or the human person is viewed as part of reality. But the East and West have different interpretations of reality and therefore have different conceptions of man. The East always considers reality as a whole, even if there are different aspects of the same reality. The Eastern mind is holistic and views everything as part of one reality. The parts are harmoniously related. The Western mind views reality as composed of different parts which are usually opposed to each other. There is, for example, the dichotomy or distinction between the material and spiritual aspects of reality. The development of philosophy in the West can be divided into several periods, namely ancient, medieval, modern, and contemporary and postmodern. Ancient Greek conception of man. Ancient philosophy is also known as ancient Greek philosophy. It is generally described as a cosmocentric philosophy because the search for truth and knowledge is centered on the nature of the universe, the cosmos. The human is conceived as part of the cosmos. He or she is in fact a microsystem in himself or herself, and he or she possesses qualities of an animate or inanimate worlds. There are three prominent philosophers of ancient Greek philosophy, namely Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates is known as a moralist, a philosopher who advocates a moral transformation among the citizens of Athens. One of his famous teachings is self knowledge. He admonished his followers to know thyself. For him, one can only transform one's self if he or she knows himself or herself. The Socratic dialogues written by his student Plato was contained his teachings and philosophy. The Socratic method is known as dialogue because of the controversial and question and answer nature of his way of teaching. The philosopher's task, according to Socrates, is to steer the mind of people and make them think for themselves, to make them critically think of their situation and the things that happen around them instead of just following the dictates and thinking of others. His great contribution to philosophy is not a system of thought about abstract concepts or theories, but a kind of thinking, a critical thinking that questions the very basis of many of our beliefs. What is needed, according to him, is a critical examination of our life, our beliefs, and our world. Socrates never claimed that he knows many things. All he knows is his own self, his own ignorance. But precisely because he lacks knowledge, that he must continue to reflect. Plato was a student and follower of Socrates. He believed that there were two types of world, the ideal and material. This material world that we see and experience is only a copy of the ideal world or the world of ideas. So, the things that we experience or perceive in this material world are not the true reality. True reality is the ideal world. In the ideal world, everything is perfect and good. Now, man has two components, the body and the soul. Our human soul pre existed in the ideal world and thus has already knowledge of the ideas. So, in our previous existence in the world of ideas, we already have the knowledge of beauty, justice, goodness, and etc. But the soul got united with the body and temporarily forgot the knowledge it acquired from the world of ideas. Thus, to gain the knowledge or to gain knowledge, the man must recall all the ideas that the soul had already known before through existence and experience. Plato likened the present condition of humanity to a group of cavemen who were imprisoned in a cave and could only see the shadows of the cave on the cave wall. Since they have not been outside the cave, they thought these shadows were the true reality. Man must understand that these shadows are not the real but only copies of the true ideas in the ideal world. The philosopher is the person who is able to see beyond the shadows on the cave wall, this cave of ignorance, into the outside world and achieves a vision of the true reality, the ideal world. But in order to do this, man must first be able to control his or her bodily desires in order to detach himself from the material world. What is needed is a personal virtue, which consists in a harmonious and balanced relation among the different faculties of power or powers of the soul. So, the human person, as a philosopher, must have a sound mind in a sound body. It is important that the mind controls the desires and passions of the body so that it can reflect on the ideas. Medieval conception of man. Medieval philosophy could be generally described as theocentric, meaning the search for truth is centered on God, the Supreme Being. Man and the world are part of the Supreme Being's creation. Although the medieval thinkers were influenced by Greek philosophy, they combined the Greeks' philosophical ideas with their theological ideas or their religious beliefs. Saint Augustine and Saint Thomas Aquinas, two of the main philosophers of the medieval period, followed and adopted the Greek philosophical tradition of Plato and Aristotle respectively. However, the notions of man are guided by their Christian faith. The main idea is that a man is a being created in the image of God, the supreme being. The ultimate end of human life is salvation. That is, to be reunited with God, the supreme being. One of the leading philosophers of the modern period was René Descartes, a French philosopher. Descartes describes man as being composed of body and spirit or mind. These two components are separate substances or entities having different attributes and functions. The mind, as a separate substance, does not depend on the body in order to exist or to be understood. It is capable of conscious acts like doubting, thinking, and willing. The mind is not an extended substance and does not take up space. It is not made of parts and cannot be corrupted or destroyed. The body is not conscious and is moved by mechanical forces acting on it. It is an extended substance and occupies space and can be divided into more elementary components. It is also corruptible. Descartes describes the relation of the mind and body as one of the interaction, which means that as opposed to the idea of Aristotle and Aquinas, where the spiritual soul and body are substantially united, the body and mind are two separate entities, and therefore they can only interact and cannot be substantially united. During the period of enlightenment, the later years of the modern period philosophy was understood to be known to be not just an instrument for intelligence but also for human happiness. One must struggle against ignorance and tyranny, which are the causes of unhappiness. He or she can fight against ignorance and tyranny by developing his or her natural powers. One can improve his or her natural powers through education and will ultimately lead to happiness. The conception of man in contemporary philosophy. The contemporary philosophers, especially the existentialists and phenomenologists, concern themselves with a new conception of man. They emphasize more man's subjectivity, his or her freedom, and relation with his or her fellow humans. Contemporary philosophers focus on the existential and practical aspects of human existence, diverting from the traditional definition of a human as a rational animal. The existentialist thinkers instead regard the human person as a subject, an embodied spirit, or as an incarnate subjectivity. The human person, according to them, is, is first and foremost a subjectivity, a center or a unique core, a wellspring initiative and meaning, and a stream of consciousness. They stress that human subjectivity is not limited to reason. It includes the affective and emotional as well. The human person does not only think of what he or she also feels and relates. The conception of man in the contemporary philosophy. The contemporary philosophy, especially the existentialists and phenomenologists, concern themselves with a new conception of man. They emphasize more man's subjectivity, his or her freedom, and relation with his or her fellow humans. Contemporary philosophers focus on the existential and practical aspects of human existence, diverting from the traditional definition of the human as a rational animal. The existentialist thinkers instead regard human person as a subject, an embodied spirit, or as an incarnate subjectivity. The human person, according to them, is at first and foremost a subjectivity, a center or a unique core, a wellspring of initiative and meaning, and a stream of consciousness. They stress that human subjectivity is not limited to reason. It includes the affective and emotional as well. The human person does not only think, he or she also feels and relates. But the human person is not just a pure subjectivity or a pure spirit. He or she is a subjectivity incarnating himself or herself. His or her body puts into flesh his or her subjectivity. The human body puts into action his or her intentions and incarnates the meaning and initiative that emanates from his or her core, which is his or her consciousness. Another picture of the human person is that he or she is not a mere subject that exists alone in the world. One basic experience of a person is that he or she lives in this world together with other men. And as he or she lives in the social or intersubjective world, he or she must enter into a personal relation with his or her fellow man. Existentialism challenges the human person to question his or her existence, the meaning of his or her own existence as a human person. Hence, the more fundamental questions are: what does it mean to be a person? And as a person, who am I? The question that philosophy now tries to answer in this search for truth is the meaning of human existence. The search for truth has become a search for meaning. The human subject is the giver or discoverer of meaning. The focus, therefore, is on individual existence. Existentialism insists on studying the human person in his or her singular and concrete existence. The human person is an individual who is constantly faced with situations wherein he or she has to make important decisions that could spell the difference between authentic and inauthentic existence. Existentialist philosophers have different interpretation of authentic and inauthentic existence. A general commonality is that an authentic existence is a meaningful existence. One's experiences are always unique to a person. Nobody feel Nobody can feel for him or her, see for him or her, think for him or her, or will for him or her. That is why one's individual lived experience is unrepeatable and unique. Some existentialist doctrines have focused on the problematic and somewhat absurd character of the human situation. The human situation is characterized by two sets of features: facticity and transcendence or possibility. Facticity refers to those pictures that are given to us and fixed from without. Our gender and race have been decided for us. Our color, our physical pictures, and the environment we are born into are somehow determined by external factors. Transcendence refers to the pictures of our existence which have been decided and created by us. Our future actions and decisions are our own making. Our attitudes towards the world and the others are our own. In the human situation, there are diverse possibilities or options from which we must choose. We can either just accept our situation or condition or rise above our present situation. The choice is ours, and this choice will determine how we will live our lives. Existentialist doctrines have also focused on the intersubjective character of human existence. Intersubjectivity is either understood in a personal relationship between two persons or subjects, the I and thou. Intersubjective relations can be between the me and me and my fellow man, between me and God. It can also be understood as a social relationship that is between me and society or among people in the community or society. Another aspect of human's existence that existentialists focus on human is freedom. This means that nothing is simply given, and since nothing is given, man decides whatever he or she makes him or himself or herself. But this does not mean that man is free to do anything he likes or she likes. Freedom pertains to a creation. That man is free to determine the person he or she wants to be. The human person is free and out of his or her freedom determines his or her action, destiny, and the future. The human person has the capacity to choose and determine his or her actions and himself or herself. Existentialist thinkers also focus on deper- depersonalization and dehumanization. The human being deprived of his or her personhood and degraded as a human being. In the midst of technological advancement, the human is deprived of personal qualities or individuality. He or she is sometimes treated like an object or a thing. The human person sometimes experiences a loss of personal identity, a feeling of being an anonymous cog in a social machine. Dominant groups or societies impose on the human person their beliefs, values, and ideals, thereby depriving a person of his or her individuality. The imposition dehumanizes the person and reduces him or her to an object. In summary, ancient Greek philosophy conceives a man as part of the cosmos. He is a microcosm in himself or herself, and he or she possesses qualities of the animate or inanimate worlds. Socrates stresses that one needs to think for himself or herself, critically think of his or her situation, and the things that happen around him or her. What is needed according to him or her is a critical examination of one's life, his or her beliefs, and of the world. Plato teaches that there are two worlds, the material and ideal. One should escape the material world of shadows and appearances and achieve a vision of the true reality, the ideal world. This is attained when the mind controls one's bodily desires and people detach themselves from the material world. The mind then is able to reflect on ideas. For Aristotle, the human person is a rational being capable of conceiving ideas. The human soul gives life to the body and has all the powers of living beings, most especially the rational power. The body is the physical principle of the human person which enables him or her to nourish, grow, reproduce, sense, feel, and move. The body and soul are substantially united. Medieval philosophers followed and adopted the Greek philosophical tradition of Plato and Aristotle, but their notions of the human person are guided by their Christian faith. The main idea is that the human person is a being created the image of the Supreme Being. For St. Augustine, the human soul is spiritual, simple, and immortal. It has three faculties, namely intellective memory, intelligence, and will. The most important among these three and is the will, corresponding to the function of loving. Since the will is free, the soul is restless, which prompts the soul function of loving. Since the will is free, I'm sorry. The most important among these three is the will, corresponding to function of loving. Since the will is free, the soul is restless, which prompts the soul to search for the meaning and truth. This search for truth and meaning ultimately ends in God, the Supreme Being. Saint Thomas Aquinas follows Aristotle's notion of the human person as being composed of body and soul and as a rational being. The person is a human person, a concrete, existing human individual, and a spiritual being. The rational soul that gives the human person is his or her spiritual capacities or faculties of intelligence and will makes him or her a person. As a spiritual being, the person is made after the image of God, the Supreme Being. Modern philosophy focuses on the rational and natural powers of the human person rather than on faith and salvation. The aim of the human life is the satisfaction of people's natural desires. The conceptions of the human person centered on reason and sense experience. Descartes describes the human as composed of two separate substances, which are body and spirit or mind. The mind, as a separate substance, does not depend on the body in order to exist or to be understood. It is capable of conscious acts like doubting, thinking, and willing. The body is not conscious and is moved by mechanical forces on it, mechanical forces acting on it. The body extended and corruptible. Lastly, the contemporary philosophers emphasize more the human subjectivity, freedom, and relation with his or her fellow humans. They focus on the existential and practical aspects of human existence. According to existentialism, the human person is first and foremost as a subjectivity, a center for a unique core, a wellspring or initiative or end meaning, and a stream of consciousness. Human subjectivity is not limited to reason. It includes the affective and emotional as well. They focus on individual human existence, human situation, freedom, intersubjective relations, and depersonalization. That's it for our lesson. Thank you.